Today I finally get to interview a police chief. Hey guys, what's going on? I hope you're having a fantastic week so far. I am super excited about this episode. About a month and a half ago, I asked you guys on YouTube, if you had any questions, what would you ask a school police chief? So with me today, I have a chief here who's been doing it for a very long time. We have worked very closely together for several years now. And I'm going to take the most upvoted questions that you guys have directly from the post. So before we begin, if you don't mind, if you can give them a little background about your education and experience.
You trying to figure out how old I am, aren't you? Aren't you 401? I keep making sure I don't use your name. It's tempting every time, so I've known you so long. Folks, I helped raise this guy right here. I'd like to think that I have. He has turned out to be an outstanding officer and an asset to the community. And he's one of these people that listens to what you've got to say if you give him good advice, which is something I learned early on in my career, and he's taken that and run with it. But I've been doing this. This is going on my 33rd year, so I'm one of these old dogs. I still can hunt, but I'm a little slower than what you young guys are, but I can still get out there and hunt. And I supervise a team of 26 school-based police officers, and our main goal is school safety. We're all cross-sworn in the county that we work in with the city and the county police department that we're in. But our main goal is school safety. That's our main focus every single day. If you guys get out there and run into a situation where you need our help, we're there. But our main focus is obviously the schools. But I was a game warden for a long time, for 17 years. I was a county officer. An agency you're familiar with, won't mention where, but for my first 2 years in law enforcement. And then I had a quick little break in service. I was still a reserve cop, but for all sworn altogether 33 years, going on 33 years this July. So I've been at it a long time. Seen a lot of changes in that time.
I'm sure you have. So yeah, needless to say, he's been doing this a long time. So, he has a lot of good advice and good tips, especially for newer officers. I'm sure you have seen your fair share of officers make stupid decisions over the years. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna jump over here to the questions. And like I said, I asked you guys about a month and a half ago to submit your questions, and you guys yourselves upvoted the most popular one. So we're just gonna kind of go down that list. So starting with the first question, and this was the most upvoted, this is by Mika Crump. What has been the most illegal thing or things seized from a student?
Wow, we've had knives, guns. As far as drugs go, you'll occasionally run into something exotic like LSD or something like that. Most of the time, it's just marijuana and that sort of thing. We've had guns come into schools. We've had knives come into schools. We seized a knife that was this long one time, a Rambo knife off of a kid. So it never ceases to amaze you at some of the things that you'll find. That's probably the most disturbing things that we've seen have been loaded firearms, loaded handguns that have come in our schools.
So that kind of, just branching off of what you said before I get to the next set of questions, my own two questions are, number one, what do you usually do with a student that has a misdemeanor amount of marijuana? And number two, what is the most common explanation for the kids that you do find with guns? What is the most common reason that they have them?
Well, your first question is, and I know out on the street what you guys typically would do. Right now in our state, we're looking at trying to figure out a way to do a misdemeanor citation. Some places do that where you can just simply write a citation to the person and cut them loose and they can appear in court later on, much like a traffic citation if they're caught with a misdemeanor amount of marijuana. I have seen times in my career where I have dumped marijuana out in a river. I've dumped marijuana out on the side of the road or on a sandbar or wherever I happen to find it. But I tell you, there's just no place for it in a school. So we don't take any, there's no warnings on that. We make cases on that every time if there's a detectable amount of marijuana. There's just
zero tolerance.
Exactly, for that kind of stuff. There's just, stop and think about it. There's no place for drugs and there's no place for weapons in a school. There's just not. Sure. It's not for that learning environment.
So it's understandable why they would be more strict about it than, say, if I stop somebody on the road and they have a dime bag, I'm going to dump it out. But
and typically, to answer your second question, typically when you catch it, like say for example, you have a third grader that brings a 22 automatic pistol to school. That's usually a show and tell sort of thing. For some reason, somebody left a weapon accessible to that kid. The kid finds it and he comes in and shows it to his buddy. It's not that he ever brought it to hurt anybody, but just make sure, folks, most of your gun accidents happen in your home. Make sure those things are locked up. I'm a Second Amendment guy. but make sure you lock your firearms up. And then you have the ones that bring them to school for ill intent. You know, they may be gang related, they may be looking to have it for whatever reason. It's not a show and tell type thing. They brought it for an overt reason.
All right, second question is from Blake Flynn. What's his opinion on gun-free zones? Does he think schools would be safer with more armed people around?
Well, as I stated earlier, I'm a Second Amendment guy, but there's places where, especially here in our particular area, you know, I've got an officer in every single school, every single level, and there was wailing and gnashing of teeth to make that happen because it requires a lot of funding to put those officers in those schools. It's a heck of a commitment for any school district to do. I'm in favor of making sure that if you have staff there that are armed, say you're a rural school district somewhere, you don't have the luxuries that we have. If you do have military personnel or former law enforcement, whatever, anybody who is competent to do that. I flew out to the state of Texas a couple years ago and served on a panel for them. They were looking at arming their staff, and one of the things I told them, and I've been consistent on this, is it doesn't need to be a novel idea. In other words, it sounds really cool if you're a coach. Hey, let's go arm our staff. Okay, and if your school board approves it, and then all of a sudden, well, you know, we don't need to go to the range today because we have this going on or that practice going on or whatever, and that novel idea becomes kind of a thing of the past, and you get sloppy with it. You know yourself, it's a perishable skill.
Oh yeah.
When I was your age, man, I could get it done. Now I have to think about it. I have to really concentrate, you know, and make sure that I'm doing all the things on the range that used to be totally natural to me. I have to think about now, and I'm not the only older guy who's gotten that way, so I can imagine not staying in practice. So as far as the average person bringing a gun into a school, like I said, I'm a Second Amendment guy, but there's just really, in a school, especially with officers already in there, there's really no reason to bring a firearm into that school.
Well, that kind of branches off into the next question. This one's from Aaron J. Does he think that having armed teachers in the classroom could be a huge asset to stop future school shootings?
Well, here's the thing. You know, they've got to be vetted, they've got to be trained, they've got to be willing. There's three things, and I've said this on I've only done one other YouTube video that's floating around out there with another group, and I always come back to the same three things. And those three things are you can fire a weapon and you can go to the range, you can be good with it. Mechanics of that weapon, how it fires, how it functions, you can hit the target. And then there's the legal aspect of it. When can I use that firearm? You know, what parameters do I have to at the moment of truth to be able to employ that firearm, to use that force which is lethal, likely to cause death or great bodily harm if I have to. And the third thing is mindset. I have seen people walk up and take guns from people that weren't willing to use them, and then you know you have a situation where they're going to use it against you. If you're going to have a weapon there and you pull it, you better be prepared to use it. So those three things have got to be present. Those folks have got to be trained. You got to consider what kind of weapon. You got to consider where you're going to store it, how you're going to keep it. Has identification, because the last thing we want to have happen is somebody not be identified. If you got an active shooter call at your active killer call somewhere at your jurisdiction, and you're screaming for help, and I come and I back you up, and I pop around the corner dressed like I am right now, you're gonna say, all right, well, that's the old chief. I mean, he's got a hard time keeping up with me, but that's him, he's a good guy, okay? And you're gonna go take off, and I'm gonna be behind you trying to find the bad guy. But you're gonna recognize me because that's the kind of relationship we have. What if it's not? There's a lot of guys
who don't know. Yeah.
So you gotta make sure that if you carry a firearm, I implore you to make sure that you're identifiable somehow as a good guy, okay? And if somebody shows up and a law enforcement officer in uniform challenges you, don't pass go, don't collect $100, do exactly what they say. Either holster the firearm, put your hands up, or drop the firearm on the ground, put your hands up, because they don't know what they're dealing with at the time. You could have all the best intentions in the world and then get yourself in a situation where it's kind of blue on blue.
Yeah.
Even if they're not a law enforcement officer, they're still trying to do the right thing.
Still friendly fire.
Exactly, still friendly fire. So you got to be careful about arming staff. I'm not totally opposed to it. Who am I to say that some rural school district in Nebraska can't arm their staff? But you've got to go about it the right way, and it can't be a novel idea. It's got to be done with policies that are 100% all on board. We're going to be involved in it, and this is what we're going to do today. Now, I will tell you this. It's difficult enough, and you know this, okay? Your folks out here that are watching this may not. It's hard enough to keep cops. I'm talking about good cops, competently trained up all the time, on that weapon.
Oh yeah.
And knowing all those rules and to engage and when they can and what they can and can't do, it's hard enough to keep your cops trained up. I have no business teaching algebra. Now, as smart as you are, you probably could. This is a guy you don't want to make mad and have him looking at your computer. Trust me, he's a whiz at that sort of stuff. But that's not me. But by the same token, do I need an algebra teacher that maybe, especially, might have some issues about it where they don't want to do it? Because stop and think about it. You may have to shoot at a person who's trying to harm others that you have known their whole student career. So, you've got to be able to put yourself in that position. Can I do this? And you don't want to have somebody who's not willing and does not have that mindset. They may be the greatest shot in the world. They may understand legalities, but if they're not willing at the moment of truth, that's going to create a lot of problems. So if folks out here decide to do that in their school districts, for goodness sake, make sure that you have those policies and procedures in place and training in place, and it doesn't become a novel idea, and those folks are identifiable when the cops show up.
Next question is from AdPad. What do you do on a daily basis? What does your job require you to do?
Well, a lot of my job is administration. I'm a little different than some because the department is so small. I've got supervisors, and I just did something. I kind of was challenged at a Chiefs Association meeting by a speaker there who's a retired guy who makes a lot of sense. He said, go out and poll your folks. Don't just walk around ignorance is bliss. Find out what they think. I got my feelings hurt a little bit when I got back, but I'm grown. I can take it. And one of the things that they said about me was I was a micromanager, and I understand that. But I'll tell you something. I'd rather be a micromanager than somebody says, have you seen the chief? I ain't seen the chief in months. You heard anything out of the chief? I don't know where he's at. He never comes out of his office. That's not the kind of chief I want to be. But I do realize I've got really good people, many that that do a jam-up job. I got one guy who's one of my lieutenants he is a walking encyclopedia. The guy knows the law. He knows what he's doing. Both of my lieutenants and my major are sharp people. But day to day, a lot of it is budget, management, looking at training aspects, dealing with cases where you may be dealing with looking at stuff along with human resources or whoever, if things are going on with employment decisions. It goes beyond just the cops and robbery stuff every day. A lot of budget preparation, things you're beginning to learn more about now, about that aspect of it. It's not all about running around out here catching bad guys all the time. There's
more sitting at the round table and making decisions.
You got it.
Lots of liability.
Exactly. How can you lessen it? How can you do better with it?
Next question is from Jonathan Hawkins. How does their training differ from a regular officer? First thing I want to say before Chief answers, and I don't mean to be rude and interject.
Don't be rude and interject.
They are regular officers. I think that's a common misconception that people have, is that school police officers are not actual police officers. And I'm sure you probably have heard that several times over your years from civilians, from citizens.
Yeah.
But the school police department is a department in itself. It's its own entity. It's no different than any other school or any other police department. The only difference is their jurisdiction. So they oversee the schools, we oversee the streets.
Some of those things oftentimes overlap, and you know yourself that there's times we're working on cases together. They may start out in the community and they come to the school, or they may start at the school and spill out in the community. That's the reason it's so important that we work hand in hand in everything that we do and be in lockstep and get along. And oftentimes that means checking your ego at the door.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sure you've probably dealt with I'm sure you've probably. I'm sorry. I'm sure you've probably dealt with very arrogant cops too. We're on the same team, right? We might wear different uniforms, but we do the same job. But I'm sure over the years you've met regular patrol officers that just think they are worlds above somebody with decades of experience in a school system.
I have because they don't have the understanding that we are the real deal. One of the things this fellow was talking about the other day that was talking to all the chiefs was saying that a lot of the younger generation, when I walked in the door, if there was a captain or a lieutenant or sergeant or chief or whatever, it's like, man, that's like a walking icon there. And they were somebody. Now that level of respect has got to be earned. They can't just walk in there and I'm the chief. I mean, that level of respect has got to be earned over time. You don't automatically get it, and that's kind of been a little bit of a thing that's made me scratch my head a little bit. But one of the things that I've always admired about you, and this is not because we're sitting here on your YouTube channel, because Lord knows I've known you since you were a pup, is that whenever you have good advice, you see something in somebody, that spark that says, this guy right here, or this girl, whoever can be somebody, they can really, really make a difference in this line of work. and you see something, and you say, I want to coach them along. You know, I want to help them. I want to tell them things that nobody told me, or maybe somebody did take the time to tell me. And that's one thing about you. Pat you on the back when you've done good. I've got on your tail when you've done bad, even though you don't work for me. I mean, you still work with me. I've got on your tail when I think you were screwing up. Mm-hmm. And you've always said, I think, you know, you're right. And I've listened to you with what you've had to say too, even as a young guy. What's your idea? Is it better than mine? Come tell me. Let's find a better idea to do it.
We definitely have good communication.
Now, we kind of rabbit trailed there. So to answer your original question, you know, we're state peace officers just like anybody else. We have to go through the same certification process. But you need to condition your officers to work in a school. They need to know how to work around kids. They need to be thick-skinned.
Parents.
They need to understand how to deal with parents. And a lot of them are your older officers. And one of the reasons that's a benefit is they've been there, done that, and they're kind of over the taillight chasing, you know, bad guy snatching things that go out on the street. Now, let me qualify this. They cannot be retired on duty.
Yeah.
You don't want to take somebody who can't make it anywhere else and say, all right, we're going to put them in a school somewhere, because if things go bad in a school, as you have seen in your career, they go bad quick. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got to have somebody who can be on top of things. So they don't need to be retired on duty. They need to really be proficient with their firearms. They really need to be proficient with shooting techniques and active threat response, those sort of things. Behavioral analysis of looking at people on that campus to see if anybody's possibly at risk for committing a violent act. You know, and it's just community policing at its core. Most days, I tell my folks, you know, the most serious thing you're going to deal with is maybe, you know, unlocking a car door for somebody who gets it broken. You know, can't get their keys out, whatever. Tying a kid's shoe. I mean, it may be something that ridiculous to breaking up a violent domestic dispute the following day between parents who are having a custody dispute there at that school that happens that quick. So you got to have an officer that's flexible that can do all those things.
All right, next question is from Kyle Banzone. I don't know if I'm butchering that or not. Should college students with CCW be allowed to carry on campus?
Well, you know, I work in a K through 12 environment, but I do know that a lot of states, including the state we're in, allow campus carry. So it all goes back to competency of being able to carry that weapon, but it all depends on the state that you're in and whatever that climate is like, where you should. Personally, in my personal opinion, yeah, I think you should be able to on a college campus, because it's a little different than a K through 12 environment.
Oh, yeah. Next question is from AL. Has he seen a shift in the attitude of children, depending on how long he's been there?
Well, I am in my 12th year, and not terribly. One of the biggest things we've seen changes in is these. Everybody's got them, and I know you're a very techie guy, and I'm not knocking anybody for being a techie guy, but it's a shame when you see kids that are sitting here, and let's say they carry on a conversation, they're texting each other. It's so just rude. Yeah, it's just absolutely. I mean, they're communicating with each other across the table by text. They're not talking anymore. I've seen a big change in the behavior of kids based upon that. So parents, whoever you are out there listening, you just make sure that you put some limitations on those cell phones. That's probably the biggest thing that I've seen some changes on. But in general, the lack of respect is definitely there. You're seeing it. I'm not saying it's gone in our society, but definitely it's not there what it was 30 years ago.
Next question is from Martin Phillip. What age do you see the most problems in, and why?
You know,
I would imagine as they get older, it gets harder.
It does. You know, there's a middle school age is it's kind of odd. I mean, you can walk down the hallway of a lot of the middle schools and kids won't even make eye contact with you. They're just like they're on another planet there for a little while, and then all of a sudden the aliens bring them back and drop them back out again. I've seen little kids in elementary school and they would speak to you and hug you and just, you know, be hanging on your leg and everything else. And then when they get to middle school, they don't know who you are. And then when they get back to high school, they're your buddy again. So they make a full circle there. I'd say obviously that the more potential for trouble, the higher you go to the grade level, the more potential trouble you're dealing with.
Next question is from Nick Taylor. What do SROs do during the summer months and breaks?
You know, we are unique in the fact that, now I work year round. But my folks typically they work here in our state 190-day work schedule. Some of them go to training. Take advantage of going to like our school safety conferences, that sort of thing. Go to specialized training at the training center here in our state. But a lot of them are off. Some of them work the summer sessions. Some of them work athletics and special events and that sort of stuff. But typically they're off. 2 weeks at Christmas.
there's definitely benefits.
Oh
to being
man,
an SRO.
absolutely, yeah. At some point in time, I'm sure when you finish up your career wherever you're at, of course you'll probably be an admiral when you retire. But anyway, you probably will enjoy it as well. And a lot of my folks, like I said, they've had careers in other agencies and they're retired and they're here. So they're really enjoying that aspect of it. Some night work, some shift work, some on-call work, but majority of it is daytime work in the school.
So you rookie city and county officers, before you make fun of an SRO, just remember they get the summer off. Who made the smarter choice? Next question is from Molly Ann. What is the most severe medical emergency you've ever seen as an SRO?
We have had some pretty severe instances where athletics. We've had people that have fallen down from climbing ropes, that sort of stuff, and had some pretty serious trauma happen. You know what scares me more than anything else, though, when it comes to K-12 school is bus stuff. Bus accidents.
Yeah.
That scares me more than anything else, because 36% of our fatalities in K-12 schools in the United States are transportation related. So therefore, we always worry about the bad guy with a gun. That's what you hear so much about in our field. But I tell folks, you've got to be looking for everything that can hurt somebody on that campus. And 36% of the time, it has to do with transportation stuff. So that's where we're the most concerned about. But as far as seeing that sort of trauma, it's typically related to things that happen on the athletic field. I've seen some compound fractures, that sort of thing happen with folks, but it's rare. It's really rare, but you do occasionally see it, and you better be prepared to deal with it. We've got school nurses that are jam up that really work well with us. All my folks are first responder trained, CPR, AED trained. We've got stop the bleed kits everywhere you look. Try to cram them everywhere. And to make sure you're ready for blood loss in the event of a real bad trauma.
Last question, how do you like interacting with the students, and what's your worst encounter with a student/teacher?
Yeah, we're kind of digging around on what's negative here. You got a lot of questions about negative stuff. The vast majority of what we deal with is uplifting. It's one of the most positive things as a law enforcement person I've ever done. I've saved drowning victims. I've been involved in rescuing children and all those neat things that go along with having a defining moment in your career. But the day-to-day reward of dealing with these kids, because most of them want to do the right thing. It's that very, very much small minority that causes some of the issues that we have to deal with. But the vast majority of them, they appreciate you being there. They want to do the right thing. We did a canine inspection in our school district just yesterday. I had kids thanking me.
Wow, really?
As I walked out. Yeah, that's refreshing because they realize you're there to try to protect them. And these kids, they want to be safe. They want to be nurtured. They want to have that structured environment. They want to know folks care.
Yeah.
And that's just a lot of them are reaching out for that. So to have that positive role model in that school just makes a huge difference. And it is one of and cops that have been around for a long time, they have gone and done it. I've hired U.S. Marshals, former troopers, former game wardens, former investigators, you name it, that have worked for me. Former chiefs, former sheriffs. And they come in and they said, wow, I didn't realize just what all goes on in a school, how tough it can be at times, but the day-to-day rewards are just far greater than anything else I've ever done.
I bet. And I bet they look up to you a bunch too, because I remember how I felt about my SROs when I was in school. And I'm actually working with my former SRO from high school, so but I remember that feeling that I had. Of course, I've always, even like when I was a kid, I always put officers kind of up on a pedestal. I know not everybody does that, but I know that the vast majority of the kids kind of look up to the officers in these schools. So it's important to pick the people, not only for their work ethic, but also the example they're going to set for these kids moving forward in their life. So, Chief, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know a lot of you have been requesting this, so I was super excited to have Chief here with me. Thank you very much.
Proud of this guy. I love you, man. You do a jam-up job.
Thank you.
Appreciate you so much.
You guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will see you very, very soon.